Well, good day to you. It is November the 2nd, and hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Now, if you're in Mexico, it is Dia de Muerte, so Feliz Dia de Muerte. If you're not living in Mexico, that simply means Happy Dia de Muerte. I'm kidding. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. And as I always like to do, just kind of point out to those people who are new, who perhaps want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, that if you want to know more about this information, the best thing to do is to do your own research. I've included links in the description portion of every one of these videos that take you to websites that have some wonderful free information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom or about his priorities. But if you want to know more about Maitreya and get some really good background information, because you don't know anything about it, the best thing to do is to go to the Share Our National site. Link is at the very top of the all those links, and you can get the best background information there than you can anywhere else. If you want to come back and join the discussion, you're always welcome to do that. Post a comment and let me know what you think. Even if it's, I can't stand what you're talking about, Gary, or Gary, I love you. That's awesome. Either way, I'm fine with it. If you want to ask a question, post your question in the comments section, or you can just email me that question at searchforsigns@mail.com, and I'll try to answer it in the next video. So, Timothy asked a question, but other people commented, and I want to thank everybody who asked a question and posted a comment. But Tim, what did you ask? And I have to say, Tim, I knew right away you had a question for me because the very first sentence you said, I have a question. And you said, I have a question, and be honest, Gary, because I don't want to lie when telling people about Jesus and Maitreya. Do you know if Maitreya brought Jesus back to life or resurrect him? I have told this to people before knowing it to be 100% true. So to answer your question, do you know, Gary, if Maitreya brought Jesus back to life and resurrected him? And if if I know what the 100% truth is, I do not. I mean, who could know the 100% whether Jesus even lived or not? You know what I mean? You don't know 100% either way. You just have to kind of trust the information or not. So therefore, I would say, when you're talking about this with people, Tim, the best thing to do is to not claim it to be 100% true or anything you say to be 100% true. You know, Benjamin Creme, when he talked about this information, he was coming from his own personal experiences. He would talk about things that Maitreya is going to do in the future, what Maitreya means for humanity, those kind of things. And he was speaking from a point of experience, but he was also speaking from the conviction that he knew, or at least believed with 100% certainty, that eventually he would be proven right. But when it came to things such as the resurrection of Jesus or other things like that, he would oftentimes, if not every time, use words like, according to my information, or according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, or something like that. So then he's not duking it out mano a mano, ideology or ideology. It's just he's giving you information, and then you can believe it or not. And I think that's probably the best way to present any of this information, because even the things that we talk about here, about Maitreya and what will happen in the future, I mean, who knows that with 100% certainty too? You know what I mean? So it's always best to kind of, as I say, speak the truth as you see it, but don't claim to speak the truth. So a little side note for those who are eavesdropping on my conversation with Tim here, I don't claim to speak the truth or to know the truth even. So I only claim to speak the truth as I see it. Now, you said don't lie, so I try not to lie. I don't think I lied in these videos, but who knows the truth about the resurrection? Even I think when the masters talk about it, or Maitreya or the Master Jesus talk about the life of Jesus, historically speaking, not the truths of that Jesus spoke, but the historical life of Jesus or Krishna or Muhammad or whatever, you will either take them at their word and trust what they say based on what you believe them to be, Maitreya or Jesus, or not, and it'll be up to the person to believe it or not, and to listen to them and trust them with honesty or not, that kind of thing. So, that would be my first recommendation based on the question and how you pose the question, right? And I'm only saying that because you said, I've told this to people before knowing it to be 100% true, because I don't think anybody could see it to be, could know it to be 100% true either way. Now, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, according to Benjamin Creme himself, and how I read it in his book, it wasn't Jesus who was resurrected. It was Maitreya entering the body of Jesus after Jesus had died. And there were some things in the Bible that are historically accurate. There's some things about Jesus's life that were written in there for symbology to help give a little bit of understanding, maybe of an esoteric truth or something like that, but weren't historically accurate. For example, the turning of water into wine was not an actual miracle that Jesus performed. According to Ben, it was when Jesus and John the Baptist, who were Essenes, they were a part of a very tiny sect, a tiny little cult of esotericists at the time, and it was a masculine order, and John the Baptist and Jesus wanted to allow women in. And it was written in the Bible, turning water into wine at the wedding was a symbol for Jesus and John the Baptist wanting to allow women into the Essene order. But anyway, it was historically accurate that Jesus died on the cross, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings and according to the Bible. The resurrection, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings and according to the Bible, is true. Now, the purpose and meaning behind both of those events perhaps is perceived differently on whether you're an esotericist or you're a fundamentalist Christian. But those are just two different viewpoints, right? According to the Christians, of course, Jesus died on the cross for the sins of humanity, and if you just believe it and profess it, you'll get to go to heaven. But that's pretty much it, and then his resurrection was the proof and evidence in the Bible that Jesus is not a human being, but divine. When I don't think Jesus ever claimed to be divine in that way, the only true Son of God, claimed to be anything more than just a person. I don't think he claimed it, and I don't even think he believed it, but that is just my take on it. A fundamentalist Christian would really disagree with that statement. You know what I mean? Now, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, when Jesus died on the cross, he went out of incarnation and didn't come back into incarnation until he was in incarnation as Apollonius of Tyana. A few years, not long, but a few years after he had passed away, he was reincarnated again as Apollonius of Tyana in Greece and became the Greek philosopher that is not really well known, but there are some people who debate that Jesus and Apollonius of Tyana are the same person in the same lifetime. They're close because they are the same individual, but just in two different incarnations. But they believe that Jesus didn't really die on the cross, escaped Palestine and went to Greece and lived out his life as Apollonius of Tyana. But it was him in another incarnation, and that was the incarnation when he became a master, according to the masters. That's what happened. Now, the resurrection happened when Maitreya himself entered the body of Jesus and lived as sometime again as people saw him as Jesus resurrected, but lived as Jesus and presented himself to the disciples and those kind of things. And at the moment that he entered the body of Jesus was the moment that Jesus's image was imprinted on the Shroud of Turin, if you're familiar with that miracle. It's been debated back and forth for centuries whether the Shroud of Turin is real or a fraud. It's been said, I have no proof or evidence to back this up, but it's been said that in the future, the Master Jesus himself will be asked about the Shroud of Turin, and he will claim it to be authentic. And then you'll either believe that to be true or not, based on whether you trust what he has to say or not. You know what I mean? But in the future, he will claim it to be an authentic miracle. And the interesting thing about the Shroud of Turin is it's a photographic negative. And even just a few centuries ago, they didn't have photography. So how would they have known what a photographic negative would have looked like? You know what I mean? But it is a photographic negative. It's quite extraordinary, right? But it was imprinted as Maitreya entered the body of Jesus and then lived out that time for however long that was as Jesus. According to Ben, I don't think everybody knew that it was Maitreya. They all saw him as Jesus, except for just a few of his closest disciples like Peter, James, John, maybe a few of the other ones, I don't know. But most of the people that saw Jesus after the resurrection did not see him as Maitreya. They saw him as Jesus. So anyway, hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on there. But when you're talking about it with people, I would not say that that's 100% true, because how do you know, right? So perhaps present it more as just information that you have heard and they can believe it for themselves or not, and then that will make it a little easier for you. You know, when you claim 100% truth, it's really hard to go back on it when you realize that perhaps what you were saying isn't true. But if you just present it as information, you can always come back and say, well, my information I thought was right at the time, but it's not right. You know, perhaps it's like this. And I think that's part of the problem that we have as people, is we want so desperately to know the truth about stuff. We're so arrogant to think that we could know the truth about something that we profess it to be true, and then when we come to find out it isn't, it makes it difficult or impossible for the person to come back and admit that they were wrong. When if you just present it as information, well, the information changes all the time, you know what I mean? And then it gives you a little bit more freedom as far as I'm concerned, you know what I mean? Now, the information that we talk about in terms of Maitreya, you know, I believe, based on my own personal experiences, just as Ben used to say based on his own personal experience and contact, he believed it to be true. But even then, when it comes to things that happen that will be happening in the future and how it will look, I mean, who can claim that to be 100% accurate either way? You know what I mean? That's why I always say it's for each and every one of us to believe it in our own way. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? So, you know, don't even claim 100% truth on that. But I do think that it will eventually be proven true. That we will eventually see Maitreya on TV. We will eventually know who he is. We'll eventually see humanity try the principle of sharing. We'll eventually see it bring about justice and bring about peace. You know, and so when talking about this information, you can go down this ideological rabbit hole and debate it, all sorts of stuff with people. And at the end of the day, it won't do anybody any good other than just get your blood pressure up, you know, or their blood pressure up, you know. And if you look at it from a non-ideological way and present it to them with not saying that it's claiming it to be true, but just claiming it as information, then perhaps they're free to believe it or not, you know. But the things that I would talk about, the things that I think are better to talk about, are about the need for peace, how to bring about peace, discuss about, the options for peace. And if you look at what and how humanity has tried to bring about peace through more war, through dominating this country, you know, through sanctions and threatening that country, does that really bring about peace? By giving money to the rich, you know what I mean, in terms of bailouts, does that bring about true justice? It doesn't. They haven't brought about justice, and threatening and more actions of war and bombing this country and those kind of things and usurping that government have not brought any peace to this world. They've done the exact opposite. And yet we believe that they will, and we continue to believe, our so-called world leaders who promise that will bring peace. Does that make sense? So, you know, looking at this information, you know, you can talk about Maitreya and how important it is that for him, you know, and who you believe him to be and those kind of things. But at the end of the day, that person will either believe it or not. But what you can't argue is the problems that we're facing, you know, as a humanity, right? And how do we fix it? And I would say that the reason why I bring up the Marshall Plan and why I think it's so important to talk about the Marshall Plan, because it's largely forgotten about. And it's hardly, if ever, looked at as a solution to the problem of peace, solving, bringing about peace. It's not looked at in that way, but it should really be looked at and studied by not only our world leaders, but by us as a population, as a solution to peace, to bring about peace. You know what I mean? As a solution to the problem of the lack of peace. And the Marshall Plan, which was instituted by the United States after World War II, gave excesses of their resources to Western Europe. And then Western Europe repaid after they had rebuilt their nations. They paid back what they took. That's the principle of sharing. It's not a one-way street where the rich nations give aid to the poor. The poor have to pay something back, have to give an excess that they have back or to another country. That's the principle of sharing. That will bring about trust, because it did bring about trust. And those aren't, I guess people could debate it ideologically if they're a capitalist, but then you could say, because a lot of times people, when you talk about the principle of sharing, or of the times that I've talked about principle of sharing with people, they always throw in there, well, that will bring about communism or whatever, right? Or fascism on some level or something like that. Or it will create a bunch of lazy people or something to that effect. And if you look, historically, it did not do that. It did not bring about communism in the United States. It did not create this generation of entitled, lazy people. Now, that came afterwards. You know what I mean? When we started getting things handed to us. But the principle of sharing in the Marshall Plan did not bring about those problems. It did bring about goodwill amongst the nations that participated in it. It did keep, I guess, at least till now, it created a level of peace because those nations haven't attacked one another. It brought about trust amongst those nations. That's the reality of the Marshall Plan. And then you relate it back to what Maitreya says, whether you believe Maitreya is the world teacher, the Christ, or whatever, it relates it back to the truth of what he's saying. Without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. And then is there truth to the fact that without peace, there will be no future? Well, that could be debated either way, right? But I would say in the direction that humanity's going, if we don't bring about peace at some point, it will destroy us at some point, whether ecologically or militarily. But that's to be debated. Does that make sense? So that's why I don't claim truth about anything, because you can debate whether the sky is really blue or not, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, it's just how we perceive things. I hope that clarified that a little bit. But anyway, I tried to answer your question as best I could, but I also wanted to add some other things to hopefully help you and others who are listening to this about, if you're interested in telling people about this story, to not talk about it from 100% truth. Talk about it as the truth as you see it, because you might be talking about Maitreya. I know this for myself. I've talked about this story thousands upon thousands of times over the years. And it's changed. My view of it's changed. My perception of all of this has changed. My perception of the emergence of Maitreya into public life has changed, because it looks different than it used to look. But thankfully, I didn't say exactly how I see it is exactly how it's going to happen, because I would be eating a bunch of humble pie and crow right now. But I didn't say it like that. I said, this is how I see it, but it could be different. But anyway, you get what I'm saying? But I love you guys. Thank you very much for the question, Tim. And I look forward to more questions and comments in the very near future. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.